All right, 7th grade. So this is video 2 under the classifying angles. So for video 2, our focus is going to be to find a missing measure. So in order for us to do that, we're going to take what we learned in video 1 about vertical and adjacent angles to help us find the missing value. So remember that vertical angles are opposite of one another. So that means that they are across from one another. Remember that vertical angles are congruent, which means that they have the same angle measure. Then we had adjacent angles, and adjacent angles are side by side. They share the same vertex, a common side, and they do not overlap. So we're going to look at an example here, and we're going to use what we know about vertical and adjacent angles to help us find these missing values. So the first one that we're going to look at is we have our figure. Okay, so we are going to find the value of x. So first thing, I'm going to find where my x is. So the x is with the 2x plus 2. Okay, so I'm going to use angle, the angle that measures 2x plus 2. Okay, so now we need to think about what we know about vertical and adjacent angles. Well, if I have the angle measure 2x plus 2, this angle that is 130 degrees is vertical to that. So angle 130 degrees and angle 2x plus 2 degrees, these are vertical. So since they are vertical angles, that means that they are congruent. So since they are congruent, we know that these two angles are equal, so we're going to write an equation stating that. So that means I have that angle 2x plus 2 is equal to angle 130 degrees. So now we have an equation, and we are going to solve this equation for x. Well, in order to solve for x, I have to perform the inverse operation. So I'm going to subtract 2 from each side. That makes 0. That leaves me with 2x equals 130 minus 2 is 128. Now I have 2x equals 128, so I need to solve for x. So that means I have to divide by the coefficient, which is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so that leaves me with x equals 128 divided by 2, which is 64. So x is equal to 64. So all we're doing here is we're finding the missing value. We're not finding the angle measure or anything like that. We're just finding what that value is. Okay, and since these were vertical angles, that means that they're congruent, and that means that they're equal. So we're going to set up an equation, and we know that x is equal to 64. All right, so we're going to try another one. We're going to try to find the value of y. So we have angle 3y minus 10 and angle 50. So those are our vertical angles here. Okay, so I have angle 3y minus 10, and I have angle 50, and these are vertical angles. And I know that vertical angles are congruent, so I'm going to write an equation. So I have 3y minus 10 is equal to 50. I'm going to solve for y. So I'm going to add 10 to each side. So that leaves me with 3y equals 50 plus 10 is 60. Now to solve for y, I'm going to divide each side by 3. And y is equal to 60 divided by 3 is 20. So y is equal to 20. Okay. Okay, so I have some more practice problems that we're going to work through together here, just to use what we know about vertical and adjacent angles to help us find the measure of the missing angle. All right, number 2. I have 120 degrees and I have 2x. Well, they are vertical angles, and since these are vertical angles, I know that they are congruent. So I know that these two angles are equal to one another. So I'm going to write my equation. 120 is equal to 2x. And then I'm going to solve for x. Well, in order to solve for x, I need to divide each side by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 120 divided by 2 is 60. So 60 is equal to x, or you can write it that x equals 60. Okay, so again, you're just finding the value of x. You're not finding the value of the measure, but you can, of the angle measure, but you can check it because if you plug x in for here, so that would be 2 times 60. Is 2 times 60 120? Yes, and we know that those two angles are equal, so that's correct. Right, number 3, we're going to find the value of x. Well, if we look here, I have 115 and I have 5x. Well, by looking at this, I know that these angles are not vertical angles. These angles are actually adjacent angles. But these angles together are forming a straight line, okay? So angle 115 degrees and angle 5x, they form a straight line. So since they form a straight line, I know that the sum of those two angles has to be equal to 180 degrees. So we're going to write an equation. We're going to add 115 and 5x together. And I know that together they have to equal 180 degrees because a straight line or a straight angle is equal to 180 degrees. So I need 5x by itself, so I'm going to get rid of 115. So I'm going to subtract 115 from each side. That makes 0. That leaves me with 5x equals 180 minus 115 is 65. Then I'm going to solve for x, so I have to divide each side by 5. So x is equal to 65 divided by 5 is 13. So x is equal to 13, okay? So since I had adjacent angles, pay attention to what those adjacent angles are forming. So here they were forming a straight line, and we know that straight lines are equal to 180 degrees, okay? All right, our last one, find the value of x. I have an angle here. I have 60 degrees and I have 3x. Well, this box right here, this means that this angle is a 90-degree angle or a right angle. Anytime you see that symbol, that means that that angle is a 90-degree angle. Well, since we know that these two adjacent angles equal a 90-degree angle, I know that 60 plus 3x has to equal 90. All right, so I want 3x by itself, so I'm going to subtract 60 from each side. So that leaves me with 3x equals 90 minus 60 is 30. And 3x equals 30. Divide each side by 3. X is going to be equal to 10. So the measure of x is 10. So some things to remember when you're finding a missing measure. You need to remember and think about what you know about vertical and adjacent angles. Remember that vertical angles are congruent. That means they're equal. Right angles equal 90 degrees and straight angles equal 180 degrees.